All right, let's go. So we're going to talk about every member response 2011 results. If you recall, the EMR campaign is a campaign that works by calendar year. So we go into we have EMR in October, and the commitments and the offerings are actually for the next calendar year. So that would begin in January. So we are in the EMR 2011 period, which began in January. Okay? And I want to give you a little bit of background. Y'all have seen this slide before. Those who have not, I'll go through it very quickly. But this is predicated on how we are structured as a financial institution in terms of various accounts. And let me see if this pointer works. Yeah, it does. Okay, so we've got two primary entities here. You've got Glory Day Lutheran Church, and then you've got Glory Day Ministries Incorporated. And the reason that you have these two is this has a certain set of tax and business implications based on its designation, and this has a certain set of tax and business opportunities based on its designation, and they're slightly different in terms of the way that the IRS and the tax code looks at it. So that's why that was established, and if you recall, the primary thing that we had at first was Sunrise House, and we still have that. It's still running. It's maintaining, if you will, in terms of its clientele and its participants. But then we went into the academy, and then we went into a land development. So this ministry allows a certain amount of opportunities that the church did not, and that's why that was created. But we have the two of them. And this is obviously the Glory Day Lutheran Church master account. It's got a capital fund, it's got an operating budget, and it's got a memorial fund. We've got some cash flows. These are basically bank lines of credit that are established out there. There are two main bank lines of credit. Those are predominantly for cash flow, meaning if at any given month the offerings or whatever intake was not matching what we needed to put out, which happens sometimes in businesses, we would go to a cash line of credit, we would take what we needed, and then we would pay it back at some point in time when the cash came in. You also have the school down here, Glory Day Lutheran School Master Account. It has an operating account, and then it has reserves in it. What I'm going to do today is I'm really going to focus primarily on the Glory Day Lutheran Church operating budget. And we'll take a look at that as it relates to the every member response. At the end, I'm going to kind of give you the big picture, as I would call it, which you've seen in the annual report. At one of our pages, we had what we owe and what we're worth. I don't know if you recall that. Well, I'm going to go double back on that, and that'll be our last slide. I'll kind of sum it up and give you a snapshot of where we're at. So let's kind of move on. Glory Day Lutheran Church operating account. The sources of income for that are various. You've got the pledges, which again we went through in October, and then you've got unpledged, people who don't make a pledge but still give. You've got the school contributing a portion of that for things like lights, heat, certain salaries, shared expenses, if you will, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that on the next slide. And then, as I mentioned, you've got credit lines that we draw on occasionally. I will tell you that we have drawn, I don't know that we've drawn on this within the last year and a half or so. Is that a fair statement, Rick? And you'll see why as we get a little bit further on in the presentation. But it used to be, when I first got on council, we were drawing regularly on these lines of credit to pay the monthly expenses. And we had a much heavier reliance on the school in terms of paying the overall church operating account. So this has changed dramatically, I believe, over the years, and we'll see a little bit more about what that looks like. Okay, so there is a cost sharing, as I mentioned. This kind of gives you an idea. The 2011 adjusted budget, I say adjusted because we voted on a budget, and then there are, in any given year, there are changes that occur, and I'll talk about those changes in a little bit. But council, within the constitutional framework, has the ability to make adjustments to the budget, and we have made those adjustments actually on 2 occasions. So this is actually the second adjusted budget. And it is for fiscal year. So here's the first thing that I will point out to you. The Every Member Response is a calendar year activity that runs from January through December. The budget for both the church, school, and Sunrise House runs on a fiscal year, which is from July to June. So sometimes you've got to do some mental gymnastics in order to make comparisons between them, and invariably I drive Rick crazy and Rick drives me crazy trying to sort this out as we make these kind of presentations. So that's the first thing I will tell you, is that if there are anomalies in numbers, it's probably because of that reason, because one runs calendar year and one runs fiscal, and in order to make a comparison, you have to do some tweaking in order to work between that. It's not too dramatic. I'm just kind of making you aware of that. Okay, so the total adjusted budget, 535, as you see there. EMR pledges, as you see there, unpledged, and school. Now, what I want to show you is provide you some context, because when I presented you this last year, this is how that pie chart looked. And the one thing that I will point out to you, two things, is the congregation is taking a much larger role in terms of supporting the church, to the extent where it's moved from 66% last year to 80% this year. And as you can see, we're not drawing on GDMI at all. That was predominantly Pastor Bugg's salary at the time, and that obviously we're not doing that anymore. And then the other thing that I will point out to you is that notwithstanding, the congregation is taking on a bigger role. The unpledged is actually shifting also. And we've seen a shift from people making a commitment to the EMR campaign to people not making a commitment. And these are people who have made commitments pretty regularly throughout the years. So, kind of interesting. Don't know why that is. Why? Obviously, you can discuss what the implications are and why that is. But there is a little bit of a shift, and you'll see that in the next slide as I break down the numbers. But there is a little bit of shift in terms of the pledged versus the unpledged as you look at the EMR.
So is your pie chart member-oriented, or is it dollar-oriented?
No, it's dollar-oriented. Yeah.
So if you're above and beyond the commitment of the EMR, does that roll to an unpledged commitment?
No.
Okay.
No. It stays as a pledged commitment.
Okay.
Where you'll see, I think the next slide will answer your question a little bit better. These are the actual numbers, other than in the far right corner, which is the projected. But if you look back in 2008, this was the profile and the total giving. Again, we're only talking the church, just the church.
General fund.
And this is only the general fund. This is not the capital fund. That's a whole other discussion. Didn't want to give you too much. We'll talk a little bit about it later in the last slide. But this is only the church operating fund. So it was at 452. We had a 93% pledge fulfillment rate. You can see the numbers between the pledged amount and the non. You probably want to go here. The pledged giving versus the non-pledged giving. And as you follow this along, you'll see that there has been an impact in terms of our congregation, in terms of obviously the economy. I'm sure the pastoral leadership changes and those kind of uncertainties. Folks have just not been giving as much as you go down the line. There is a slight drop-off in the total giving. I wouldn't consider this to be significant, honestly. I mean, what I would say is I think we've been pretty much flatlined for the last few years. There is a shift, projected anyway, and these are, Rick has his mathematical models that he uses in the late nights with his divining rod and maybe a scotch on the side. And so Rick has made a projection, because again, the calendar year versus fiscal year. But anyway, Rick has made a projection, and these are the numbers he's showing. I think these are healthy numbers. Again, if you look at the total giving. As I mentioned, look at the shift in non-pledged giving as opposed to pledged giving. So this is going down, but this is going up. So folks are still giving, they're just not pledging. And I don't know if that's you know, it's too complicated a process. I don't think it is, but anyway, it's changing. But again, I think it's still a very healthy bottom line in terms of what the congregation